All right, and welcome to this live edition of the Fieldhouse Files podcast. I thought I'd come on here. So much to discuss and talk about ahead of tonight's WNBA draft, but where I want to start is just the stark contrast from where this franchise was 1 year ago. Of course, by this point last year, the Fever had the number one pick after yet another poor season, and we knew Caitlin Clark was entered into the draft. So it was a sure thing here, and that led to 2.5 million people tuning in 1 year ago on draft night, even though we know Clark was going number one overall. And obviously, there were several other names that were in the mix as well that had grown in popularity just because of the NCAA tournament. But that is just a staggering number to get almost 5x what you had gotten over the previous year on the draft alone. But this year, the Fever sit in a much different situation, and that's a good thing. That's a positive. It's where they should be after having another year of progress here, right? Moving to 20 wins, finishing 20-20 overall. They completely overhauled everything this offseason. Very few things remain intact. In fact, just a couple of staffers. You got one assistant coach back. But a new front office. Lynn Dunn is still there, but she moved from general manager to team consultant. You have, again, almost an entire new coaching staff led by Stephanie White, who I think will do a phenomenal job for this Fever team. I've known her for 20 plus years, and I know what a great communicator, great leader, and great coach she is out there, in addition to her experience, her basketball knowledge, all of that. And then from a playing standpoint, there's 12 roster spots and only 5 players are back from last season. You obviously have your core group of Caitlin, of Kelsey Mitchell, and Aaliyah Boston. First time in 3 years, Fever do not have the first overall pick, right? It was Boston in 23, Clark in 24. This year, it belongs to the Dallas Wings, who figure to take Paige Beckers with the top overall pick. And that'll be fun because the Fever are slated to play one game down in Dallas at American Airlines Arena, the first WNBA game ever at the home of the Dallas Mavericks. But right now, if you're the Fever, you basically have your roster, I think, with the exception of whether players elsewhere get waived, become attainable, if there's a last-minute trade that pops up, or if for some reason a rookie that you're probably going to draft is able to outperform a veteran in training camp. Right now, you already have 12 players, the maximum allowed for the season under roster. But you can bring in a couple players to training camp and see what they can produce. The Fever do not have a first-round pick, but they do have a couple of seconds and 1/3. It's interesting. They have consecutive picks in that second round, what ultimately are picks 19 and 20 overall. I think they're 7 and 8 in that second round. But at that point, it's so difficult to even predict, right? I bet after the top 5, it's difficult to predict. At that point, it'll very much be best available. And that's what it should be. It's what the draft essentially should be at almost all times. When you start drafting by position, when you start overthinking it, when you start getting too cute with it, that's what gets you beat. That's what gets you fired in a couple of years. Hi, Katie. Good afternoon. Yeah, and you're right. It's insane to go from back-to-back top overall picks to now just 19 is their first pick in this draft. So we'll see what they go with it individually. I could see 2 routes in particular, but this obviously is without knowing who's available, without knowing who they met with and who really shined for them. But to me, you can always use wings. You can always use a 6'3" wing that can defend, play both ends of the floor, can space the floor, can shoot, can play in the pick and roll. I'm always looking to add those type of players. And then secondly, kind of the scrappy do-it-all type of player. An individual who could be a great practice player, who can defend, who can go in and maybe help get a stop when you need it, can just play smart basketball. And it might not even be for this year. That might be a pick more so for 2 or 3 years down the road. But look, we've seen in recent history, especially sadly with this Fever team, is that first round picks aren't guaranteed roster spots or to be with a team more than a year or two. And so, look, you're talking a mid-tier second round pick in a league with just 12 roster spots for a team. Now, this season, you have one more additional team with the Golden State Valkyries joining the fold, but there are limited roster spots. And so that'll obviously increase this following year when you have Portland and Toronto also joining the fold. Should they draft and stash with their cap situation? That could be an option for sure. Um, I could see that. I would more likely see it being, let's draft a player. Let's see what she can contribute. You don't have to give a guaranteed contract. Bring her to camp, try her out, see if she can earn a spot on this roster that's very experienced, that has a lot of championships under its belt, that has kind of roles, I think for the most part, a lot figured out, and then can go from there. It's a luxury now to have it, right? The Fever went from needing anything and everything to now being able to be a little bit more strategic, a little bit more particular and decisive in the directions they are wanting to do. Yeah, and Scott Mincing in as well. You could absolutely stash a player. Now, 2 weekends ago, I was in Tampa for the Final Four, along with thousands of others. It was remarkable down there. I mean, I remember working or covering the women's Final Four when it was here. I want to say like 2015, when Breanna Stewart and UConn completed the four-peat. It was just remarkable. But I remember the media room wasn't full. There were tons of empty chairs to ask questions. That was not at all the case down in Tampa. Credentials were full. They had to turn people down. Hotels were booked. Tickets were going for more expensive than the men's tournament, although, to be clear, the men's had more tickets available with a larger seating capacity. But it is remarkable, no question, about the growth of the women's game. It starts with the college and then has moved to the WNBA, and I think we'll get even better here with more names, more known players, and also more exposure, whether it's on outlets like mine, or if it's on more national TV games and Ion and Prime Video and NBC here in another year and things like that. That is all going to help the growth of the league moving forward here. And so I know a lot of you fans are just eager and ready to get this season, get this show on the road after what it's been a long 7 months. Now, Fever fans, you did have a couple of players that played down in Miami at Unrivaled, and congrats to Lexi Hall for her team taking home the winning prize. Aaliyah Boston's team, I think, got to the Final Four, but was unable to advance there. But before you know it, here in a couple weeks, we'll be ready to go to the Fieldhouse for a preseason game against the Washington Mystics, who, by the way, have picks 3, 4, and 6. They have 3 of the top 6 picks in this draft. I think one thing that's been interesting is with the influx of money, the influx of attention, and the greater demands on these teams is you've seen several of them go a variety of directions. In Connecticut, it was hard to hire a coach. It's hard to get people to play in Connecticut because of the airport and the remote location and all those certain things. And so I'm curious what that team looks like after they had the number 1 defense. They had annually been a contending team. Man, there were so many good Fever Connecticut Suns series over the last, decade plus, no question. Even going back to 2012 when the Fever won the WNBA championship, I was there and enjoying all of that and being part of that. Now in a very different role here, but Connecticut's one. How about Washington Mystics completely remaking the roster? There's countless head coaching changes starting in Dallas, I think LA, Atlanta. Weren't there like 8? I want to say like 8 of 12 coaching changes. Plus you have a new coach there with the Golden State Valkyries. Chicago getting a new coach with my guy Tyler Marsh, former Mad Ants and Pacers assistant coach. He's getting his first opportunity. Chicago very much wanted Stephanie White. They targeted her, made her a big offer, but ultimately the pull to come back home was too strong. Yeah, I agree, Jason. Connecticut will be bad. Yeah, absolutely. It'll be unusual though, because we know what kind of support they have. We know what kind of basketball they have for women's basketball there in Connecticut. And I'm expecting them not to do very well whatsoever. Dallas, we'll see. Paige will definitely help. And that's, of course, where Nalissa Smith was traded in the offseason. And part of that package, I think it was a 4-team deal, if I remember right, brought Sophie Cunningham, as Scott mentioned there. Yeah, she's ready to get going. That's one of the camp battles I'm very curious to see here coming up is the Sophie Cunningham, Lexi Hall. How do they find enough minutes for each of them? Mostly because you're going to want, I think, one of Caitlin and Kelsey Mitchell on the court at almost all times, leaving that extra spot there for this off-guard position for an additional player. But who is that? And that's something they'll have to figure out in one of the camp battles that I am curious to watch. Hello, Matt. Appreciate you jumping on here. Appreciate the support. The grind doesn't stop. You know that as well as anyone. And of course, had to wear my new Masters hat because how phenomenal, by the way, guys, was yesterday. Elite. I was just disappointed that there were so many other sports going on that I couldn't watch because I was so compelled by Sunday at the Masters. It was so good. But you had an incredible IndyCar race. You had NBA playoffs, all 30 teams in action actually for the final day of the regular season. The Clippers Warriors game was really good at the finish there, but nothing topped Rory finally getting that win at the Masters. Fortunately, the Pacers played the early game, although they tried to extend it by another 20 minutes or so by going into double overtime. But I should mention there, and I wrote about it here today at fieldhousefiles.com, that they were able to get their 50th win of the season. And it was the third unit, known as the Green Team, that was able to get it done there while several starters rested. Other guys played limited minutes. It's exactly the type of way you'd like to go out in the regular season and into the playoffs, with key players resting, bench guys getting playing time, bench guys getting confidence, and no injuries happening there because of it. Jason says, I think Lexi and Sophie can play three. Doesn't sound like Bonner is getting big minutes. Yeah, I could totally see them spending some time at the three. You got to have lineup versatility. And I think that's one of the things, Jason, that really stood out to me about Stephanie White's teams there in Connecticut, in particular with defensive versatility. You could play Bonner at the one, you could play her at the four. All those type of things. And so those are the kind of camp battles that I'm curious to see will shake out. And then we'll have a much clearer idea of where things are headed into the season. And one of the biggest priorities for Coach White as well was having depth, was having players you could depend on the bench. Because, I mean, Caitlin and Kelsey played all 40 games. I think they averaged like 38 minutes per game. They were worn down. Just imagine those players playing 4 minutes less per game and how much more productive, effective, energized they can be because of it. And also you have a better chance of winning your bench minutes when you have a strong second group that can come in and provide a jolt to the offense or defense, much like we see with the Pacers with that group in a very different lineup. RC basketball plus hockey games were going on. Cubs. Yeah, that's true as well. I'll just say those two aren't exactly in my wheelhouse, but you're absolutely right. Looking forward to Pacers playing as well, for sure. Yeah, game one coming up Saturday, 1 p.m. here in Indianapolis over at Gamebridge Fieldhouse. They'll get the playoffs started with the first game. That's on ESPN. And for those in the local area, it's also with CD and QB on FanDuel Sports Network. How many spots are the Women Fever draft competing for realistically? Is it just one? Realistically, probably. Yeah, unless you do have a couple players already under on the roster, but there's flexibility within that. For example, their last addition was the center forward spot. Jillian, I'm going to butcher this. Aline. What does she look like? Jaylen Brown, very young player. I think she's entering her second season. What does she look like with this group, and how does she mingle in? And what I mean by that is she might be great and be a strong third or fourth option at the guard spot. Or that said, maybe she gets beat out in camp by a player. I don't think a player like that is guaranteed by any means. I think you sort of know Bonner, Damiris Dantas, Natasha Howard. You know those players are going to be there, but you got to bring in a competitive camp. They want players to come in and be ready to fight for a position. And so those last couple of spots are unsettled, but realistically, yeah, I could see maybe one spot. And also, you got to consider the talent. In that mid-second round, you're probably not going to get a player that's ready to contribute this year or maybe next. Now, there are some exceptions, but that's just being realistic. Getting Bonner was the largest gift in the offseason, says RC in basketball. Hopeful she would come, but I didn't get my hopes up. Yeah, I was surprised because, one, she split away from her partner, who I think went to Phoenix. That's difficult, especially with kids. But it's also easier to follow some of your coaches and the familiarity there. And she's a veteran. And I could see her also, this is a conversation I want to have with her, is, I mean, how much when she entered the league 15 plus years ago, getting no attention, to now she came to the Fever where 41 of 44 games are on national TV, where everyone is watching this team, where every fan and follower knows a little bit about everybody else in addition to Clark and Mitchell and Boston. And maybe she wants to relish in all that the last couple of years, in addition to wanting to be on a contender. Phoenix probably rebuilding after Taurasi. Connecticut absolutely rebuilding. So that factors in if you're DeWanna Bonner. Just Jules, can't wait for Brazilian national game on my birthday. And you got tickets to the Iowa preseason. Well done. I actually just got a email today from having to sign up for my media credential to go to that Iowa game. I had my hotel booked the minute I got the email announcing that preseason game, but had to apply for that credential and all that stuff. So we shall see. It's just a couple weeks away. I don't like how it's a back-to-back, right? They have an afternoon game that Saturday, May 3rd against the Mystics, and then turn around and go right to Iowa City to play the Brazilian national team, as you alluded to, in another preseason game that was added. So that is very cool. My thoughts on drafting a center? Sure, just depends on where and who else is available. The trouble is, again, as I alluded to early on, if you're just joining me here, is it is so hard to anticipate what's available and what could work out for them in the middle of the second round here, right? Especially in the women's game, I think it's less predictive than the NBA draft. We also have a lot more measurables. We have a full draft combine that lasts a week. All those different things. I'd be lying here if I could tell you, hey, here are 3 names they're targeting at 19. Like, come on. I'm not sure if they, they would have to know at this point how they're kind of feeling at that point, and if this player is available, what they'll do, or whether you trade that away. But right now, the Fever are in a very strong position where you do not have to be relying on the draft like you were anymore. Now you fill in gaps with free agency, and you also could work a trade. But more than anything, you're eager because a lot of players are wanting to be on this team, like RC alluded to earlier, in that of DeWanna Bonner and Natasha Howard. These veteran players who are closer to the end of their career than the beginning, and they want to come here and be part of championship aspirations, lead. It's remarkable. I mean, DeWanna Bonner's played more playoff games than any other player in WNBA history. And remember last postseason when the Fever returned for the first time since Tamika Catchings' days in 2016. 0. Their starting 5, which has all been drafted by the team, which I did think was cool, had 0 games of playoff experience with the Fever. That's the difference you're talking about here. Just Jules, yep, you're right. Everything does look fantastic, and you do hope it translates. I think the starting 5 is pretty obvious with the 3 foundational pieces plus Bonner and Howard going into camp. That's what I'm looking for. Now, things could change, absolutely, but that's what I anticipate seeing. I'm not one, though, I should note, that really doesn't care too much about starting lineups. It's how they finish. What's that finishing group? And, I'll be curious how quickly the defense can come along here, right? Because Connecticut under Stephanie White, Austin Kelly, and Karima was here last year. But Breon January, that's what I was trying to think of. That defense, they were number 2 years ago, number 1 in the league in defense last year. They had incredible defensive versatility. This is a Fever team that needed upgrades defensively, both in terms of coaching, schematics, and personnel. And I think they got all of that here this offseason. So that's something I'll be watching closely. Have they broken ground on the new training facility? They have. I'll post pictures. I need to at fieldhousefiles.com, but they did that, I want to say, at least a month ago. So they're moving dirt on that $78 million facility. Absolutely. Katie says, I was in Iowa for Caitlin's jersey retirement, and that's when the news dropped about Bonner. Had a really good day. There you go. That's awesome. I'm sure that was a lot of fun, and I know Caitlin had a blast at that. Where can you watch WNBA draft at Lithuania? Great question. Can you stream ESPN somehow? That's probably how you do it. I've never had to look into that. That's the new growth problem that the league is engaged with. Is normally you don't have to worry about that as much, but now this is a global audience. I mean, I wrote yesterday about Caitlin Clark going to the Masters, and it's fun to see the live views. And there's people from the UK and Africa and over there in Europe, in addition to US, all over, reading a story about Caitlin, golf, basketball, all of it intermixed. And so that's the type of growth that this league is having, and it's supercharged because of the entrance of Caitlin Clark into the league 1 year ago. What else? Where can you watch the draft for free? For free, I'm not sure. I don't think it's on ABC, so I think it'd just be ESPN. And if not there, I would just go to WNBA.com and see the live ticker there as they update it. Social media would be the other thing. I'll be posting what the Fever end up doing, if there's any surprises or anything like that. Um, Not sure otherwise. Katie, I think you're talking about Lithuania free trial with YouTube TV. You could probably do that for stateside, but for the individual in Lithuania, that's probably not happening. Eric does raise a good point. Maybe the WNBA app. I doubt that. I do, because ESPN owns the rights, but it's certainly worth checking here coming up tonight. Draft coverage starts, I think, at 7:30, which suggests to me the first pick will probably be about 7:45 and then go from there. So Fever won't be on the clock till after 8 o'clock. If you go by that measure, again, they have 19, 20, and 33 for now. They may trade out of them. They may ultimately decide, hey, we don't like what's on the board, or maybe we can send a couple draft picks and get a more ready-made player. Those are the things they have to consider right now when you have a championship contending roster. Yeah, I said it. Last year, you're trying to get back to the postseason for the first time since 2016. And now you're trying to do all you can to be all in with Caitlin and to maximize this championship window. You have your foundational pieces. You have your experience. You have your players that have championships. Now you're just trying to gel. And that's the key thing for training camp, because you have basically a week. Now, what I do like is many of them have come in and out of Indianapolis throughout the offseason. Caitlin's mostly been here. We've seen Lexi Hall here at times, although she spent a couple months down in Miami for Unrivaled. Aaliyah Boston's been here occasionally. She also had Unrivaled plus TV commitments. And then you just had several other players go in and out. Sophie Cunningham's here for a week. Dewana Bonner was here, I think, for a week or two. Sydney Colson came in for a few days. All that. So that'll start ramping up here as I think players, if they haven't already, start making their way back here to Indy, get settled in with their arrangements, whether it's an apartment or renting a house, however they choose to live here in Indianapolis. What time will it start again? About 7:45 Eastern. I do like Paige's game. I don't think it'll translate as quickly, but I think she'll definitely have a impact and really help elevate both the league and the Dallas Wings. But I don't think it'll be at the level or even close to what Caitlin did. I can already see people starting that narrative. Caitlin versus Paige. Let them just hoop. Yeah, totally agree. I'm tired of the Caitlin Angel narrative, because it's all it is. It's not a rivalry. And yet the WNBA itself came out here, I think last week, saying, hey, week one is rivalry week. Caitlin herself said she doesn't have any rivals. You have to be in the league long enough also to have any rivals. So I think it's foolish. I also think it's just leading into it to try to gain more viewers, kind of the WWE thing of creating rivalries, battles, and drawing in an audience because of all that. I personally just love the game. I love the battles. I love what they're doing out on the court and how the teams adjust and get better, and the progress and process they stick to. That's what I enjoy, but I know that's not for everyone. Oh, do they provide free housing for the players? Ooh, that's a good question. I think so. I think they do. They're there briefly, obviously. It's not a full season. It's just 6 months. There's better deals overseas when it comes to that. They'll often get maybe a chef, or it depends what level you're at, right? But you get a translator, a chef, maybe a car service, in addition to having where you're staying at for free. But they have options of a place to stay right near the arena to make things easier. Some choose to do that. Some do not. Some go elsewhere. Some want a house versus an apartment. It's all personal preference. And I could say this, I mean, with an older team, more experienced, I would guess a lot of them are less inclined to do the apartment nearby, and more so, I want more space or spread out. I have a family, all those different things. So that's definitely something to keep in mind here. Plus, how would the Valkyries already have a rival? Yeah, no, you're no kidding, Patricia. Absolutely. I even hear this chatter in my coverage with the Pacers is, almost any team in the Eastern Conference. Hey, they play the rival Cleveland Cavalier. That's not a rival. It's never been a rival. Maybe the Bulls used to in the 90s. I don't think so, though. The Pacers had the rival of the New York Knicks. Maybe they did there for a couple of years with the Pistons during the Brawl days, but not really. I think actually that's something I'd like to see more of in sports. I'd like to see more rivalries created. You just don't anymore. And I think the primary reason for that is the players are so friendly. They know each other. They grew up playing AAU against or with each other. And so less of that unfamiliarity exists. And there's already pre existing relationships with them. Now, whether they get along or not, or want to beat the heck out of each other or not, I don't know that. But you just don't have a ton of rivalries. You have some franchise rivalries, right? Lakers, Celtics, for example. But there's not too many, even in the NBA, which has been around, like 80 plus years. Page getting a championship should have been expected with that UConn roster. Yeah, it's just a matter of them being healthy. That's the whole thing. I saw them play at Butler 2 years ago, and they easily won, but I don't think Page played. I think they were down like three of their top four players or something like that. It shows just what having health can do for you and give you the opportunity to have success there. So, yeah, that UConn team, you have the coaching, you have top recruits. It's all about availability. And then, like I'm talking with the Fever, how well they've been able to gel and play together. And yeah, you have a couple of elite talents there. I mean, Sarah Strong, for example, what she was able to put up, and the rest of that group. It was really impressive there watching down at Tampa for the women's Final Four. And South Carolina is so good, and yet not even on that same level as UConn. Even the IU women's team the last couple of years, down a little bit this year, but 2 years ago, I think, top 8 team, that was on a much different level still than what this UConn women's basketball team was. But we've ventured into a variety of different subjects. And that's one thing I do love about this live is you never know what direction we might go. But what I do know is this Fever season is quickly approaching. It's funny to me, and I wrote about it again yesterday at fieldhousefiles.com. You got to join me there if you have not already. But what did the offseason start with? Started with Caitlin talking about golf, and then it kind of officially ended with Caitlin being at golf down at the Masters, talking about golf and predicting with 2 days to go, 2 of the 4 days in, that Rory was going to win it, that she could see something in his eye and thought he would win. And guess what? He ultimately did. West Coast, Fever have 3 picks, 19, 20, and 33. No first-round picks. Check fieldhousefiles.com. I wrote all about that today as well and detailed it. Or you can just play back this video now, I think, or when it's done, as I've discussed kind of at length, their options there. And realistically, in summary, I think you might get a player who can come in and really compete in training camp and give herself a chance. But there aren't really just any available roster spots just hanging out wide open for any takings. It's not the case. What was it, like 3 years ago when the Fever added – what was it, 5 draft picks, something like that? I think that was the Lexi Hall, Grace Berger type year, if I remember correctly. That is not at all the case now. Now you're filling holes. You're not filling gaps. Right now, you're really plugging holes and trying to make this thing all come together rather than just we can use anything and everything. That's the luxury of being in the Fever's position that they have right now. How come we don't have more players on the same timeline as Caitlin and Aaliyah? You do somewhat. You're talking about Aaliyah. You're talking about Lexi. The trouble is several of the players they waived. Just look back at their history in the first round in drafting. They're gone. They didn't pan out. They were bad picks. Secondly, you've moved on from some. For example, like Nalissa Smith. She would have very much been on that timeline. But I think there was a disconnect. Both sides wanted different things. You move her. You bring in Sophie Cunningham. That's another reason you don't have another player on that same timeline. Celeste Taylor, I would have liked to see her more. She was the second round pick, I think, last year. Never really got an option. Goes elsewhere, gets a chance in, I think, was it Minnesota and now Phoenix? Anyway, I think she's still in Phoenix and is going in on a training camp contract to try to earn that roster. So again, it's just so tough to make a roster, even first round picks, but especially outside first round picks. John, I think you're probably most accurate here that they will draft and then send overseas to develop. Damiris Dantas did a lot of that, spent some time overseas several years ago, then came back, and we all wrote about that leading into this past year. That playoff experience is what is valuable. Absolutely. You could probably use one more player, as I've said, that either has size and athleticism and versatility or kind of that do everything. I'm kind of thinking of like a Lexi Hall player, right? Who doesn't care about her role, isn't going to, negatively speak her mind or be a derailment for the team. Will go dive on the board, get loose balls, be willing to defend. You can always use players like that as well. It doesn't mean they're going to play, but they're good practice players. And so that's kind of the best case scenario, I think, right there. Hi, guys. Does anyone know where to watch from the UK? I do not. I am not sure. These are new age questions for the WNBA, and that's a good problem to have. That all these viewers are wanting to watch from not just in Indiana or the United States, but outside because the interest level. Lucy Olson, I think second, maybe third round there. She's kind of the type of player I could see the Fever getting just because she can do a little bit of everything. Will play hard, fits the market. Midwest girl coming from Iowa, right there. But we'll see with her. It should be an interesting night. I'll take a couple more questions here if anyone else has one. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap this up and get back to more of my writing coverage ahead of tonight's in WNBA draft. It goes Dallas, Seattle, Washington. Yeah, Washington again. Well, Golden State, and then Washington for a third time in the top 6 picks. Paige Becker's clearly probably going to go number 1. And it'll all take place in New York. And what's remarkable, too, is remember, before last year, they went like 6 years without selling tickets. Then Caitlin's years happens. They sell out tickets within 15 minutes. They add more tickets this year. They sell out. It's become a thing, and it speaks to the growth of this league. It's the final year, though, under the current collective bargaining agreement. Things are about to get very interesting, I think, leading into next season. Hopefully there's no lockout. Hopefully the players can get paid more, just as the league's revenue also goes up. But I also understand the league and ownership standpoint is that they've been in the red. They've been in debt for 20-some years and have not made much money. So they want to make some money back before they pay players even more. I totally see it from both sides. And because of that, that's what these teams and players are going to have to bargain out throughout the collective bargaining agreement, because we know the players have already opted out for next season. We hope they can come to an agreement before next season. Quick thoughts, Liam. Yeah, I love this new team. I think they did a very good job led by Kelly Krauskopf to remake this roster. You get a coaching staff that is phenomenal. You have a front office that knows exactly what they're doing, has great command of everyone, great contacts. I mean, you heard Sydney Colson, you heard Diana Taurasi when Caitlin was on her Sue and Taurasi show talk about, hey, I need to come to the Fever Mercury game. Oh yeah, I got Amber Cox's number. Don't underestimate the impact of your basketball experience, of contacts, of who you know, whether it can have someone make a call for you, all those different things. And then they've just upgraded at every spot. You were able to bring back Kelsey Mitchell, which I think you should not have assumed, but have hoped for, and they were able to get that done. And then look, Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark are 23 years old. They're not even at their peak yet, and they've already had all-star, all-NBA, all WNBA seasons. So there's a lot to be excited about. Appreciate that, John. Thanks for the support and watching here at Fieldhouse Files YouTube and fieldhousefiles.com. Yeah, Scott, you're welcome. Appreciate you and others joining me. I'll have to do a lot more of these. Wow, it's already been a half an hour and almost 150 of you still with me here. So I appreciate that. If there's anything groundbreaking, I'll come on tonight. I'm probably really not expecting for that to happen. Expecting it to be kind of a rather quiet night, I think, for this Fever team. They've already made their moves, and so that's where they're currently at. One other thing I wanted to tease is you might remember I wrote for the Athlon Sports magazine. I wrote 3 features for them at the end of last season. Well, this year I wrote 2 going into this upcoming season. One on Caitlin Clark's offseason. It's a long feature, 2,500 words almost, at least. And then I wrote the Fever preview. So that's something you'll want to maybe take a look at and buy whenever that hits the shelves. I'll let you know. Or if you're a paid subscriber at Fieldhouse Files, I'll make that available there as well. But I wanted to make you aware of what's to come there in other coverage. But it's a big night for the league, obviously. I'm very curious to see how they look to grow upon last season, record ratings, record ticket sales. I love the fact that the Fever, 41 of 44 games are on national TV, and all 6 teams that do not play in an NBA venue have moved games to an NBA venue for when the Fever are in town. That is no surprise and was definitely necessary. All right, that wraps up this live special report here leading into the WNBA draft. Thanks so much to all of you for joining me. I really appreciate that. I hope you're subscribed here with me. I hope you're subscribed at fieldhousefiles.com with me. A lot more content to come as the Fever and WNBA season is right around the corner. Thanks again for joining me, and I will talk to you all again very soon.